In a quiet, forgotten corner of the world, there was a small town where life moved at its own slow pace. The streets were lined with old brick buildings, their paint peeling from years of neglect, and the air carried the faint smell of rusted metal and damp earth. It wasn't the kind of place dreams were made of. Instead, it was a place where people worked hard just to survive. Among these residents lived Ethan, a 17-year-old boy whose days were filled with relentless effort to keep his family afloat. Ethan had always been the rock of his household. His parents passed away in a car accident when he was only 12, leaving him responsible for taking care of his 8-year-old sister, Lily. From that day forward, Ethan vowed to protect her no matter what. He dropped out of school after completing 10th grade and took on odd jobs around town, fixing bicycles, mowing lawns, washing cars, anything that could bring in some money. Despite the challenges, Ethan managed to create a semblance of normalcy. For Lily, she attended school, played with her friends, and dreamed of becoming an artist one day. Her laughter was like sunlight piercing through the gloom of their difficult circumstances. But fate is unpredictable, and sometimes even the strongest efforts aren't enough to shield loved ones from hardship. When Lily turned 15, she started feeling unwell. At first, it seemed like nothing more than fatigue or a common cold. But as weeks turned into months, her condition worsened. She grew pale, lost weight, and often complained of sharp pains in her chest. Alarmed, Ethan borrowed money from neighbors and took her to the nearest hospital, which was over an hour's drive away. After a series of tests, the doctors delivered devastating news. Lily had a rare form of cancer that required immediate treatment. The diagnosis hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. He sat in the sterile waiting room, clutching the doctor's report in trembling hands, unable to process the gravity of the situation. The doctors explained that while traditional treatments might help manage the disease temporarily, the best chance for Lily's survival lay in an experimental procedure offered by a specialized clinic in the city. The catch? It cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, a sum far beyond anything Ethan could ever hope to earn. Desperation clawed at Ethan's heart. He couldn't lose Lily. She was all he had left. Over the next few weeks, he doubled down on his work, taking up additional shifts wherever possible. He even sold most of their belongings, including his late mother's jewelry and his father's prized watch. Yet, despite his tireless efforts, the medical bills continued to pile up, and the gap between what they needed and what they had only widened. Every night, Ethan lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling of their tiny apartment, wondering how he could possibly save his sister. One evening, as Ethan scrolled through social media during a rare break, he stumbled upon an article about Victor Langley, one of the richest men in the country. The headline read, "Billionaire tech mogul expands empire with another groundbreaking innovation." According to the piece, Langley's net worth was estimated to be well over $10 billion. Accompanying the article was a photo of the man himself, tall, impeccably dressed, and exuding an aura of power. Ethan stared at the picture, his mind racing. Here was someone who had more money than he could ever spend in a lifetime, someone who wouldn't even notice if a fraction of his wealth disappeared. A dangerous thought began to take root in Ethan's mind. What if he could somehow get his hands on just a small portion of Langley's fortune? It wouldn't be stealing, he reasoned, it would be borrowing. Just enough to pay for Lily's treatment, and then he'd find a way to repay it someday. The idea terrified him, but the alternative, watching Lily slip away, was unbearable. That night, Ethan made a decision. He would break into Victor Langley's mansion and take what he needed. It was reckless, risky, and probably doomed to fail, but Ethan didn't care. He had to try. Over the following days, Ethan meticulously planned every detail of the operation. Using online maps and satellite images, he studied the layout of Langley's estate, noting the locations of security cameras and guard posts. He scavenged materials to create makeshift tools, a wire hanger bent into a hook, a flashlight duct taped to a stick, and practiced sneaking around empty warehouses late at night to hone his stealth skills. Each step brought him closer to the moment of truth, and though fear gnawed at him constantly, he reminded himself why he was doing this. For Lily. Always. for Lily. Finally, the night arrived. Under the cover of darkness, Ethan slipped out of his apartment, his backpack slung over one shoulder. Inside, he carried a single photograph of him and Lily taken during happier times, a reminder of what he was fighting for. As he approached Langley's mansion, its towering walls and gleaming windows loomed before him like a fortress. For a brief moment, doubt crept in. What if he got caught? What if he failed? Shaking off the thoughts, Ethan took a deep breath and stepped into the shadows, determined to see his plan through. Little did he know this act of desperation would set off a chain of events that would change his life and the lives of those around him forever. The night was eerily silent as Ethan approached Victor Langley's sprawling estate. The mansion stood like a fortress, surrounded by high walls and guarded gates. Despite the overwhelming sense of dread pressing down on him, Ethan reminded himself of why he was there. His sister Lily's life depended on this. Clutching the photograph of her in his pocket, he took a deep breath and began scaling the outer wall, using a makeshift rope ladder he'd crafted from old belts and sturdy fabric, scraps. Once inside the compound, Ethan moved cautiously, sticking to the shadows cast by the towering trees that lined the property. He had spent hours studying satellite images and security camera placements online, memorizing every detail of the layout. Still, seeing it in person felt different, more intimidating. Every sound, from the rustling leaves to the distant hum of crickets, made his heart race. He knew one wrong move could mean disaster. Ethan reached the side entrance of the mansion without triggering any alarms, or so he thought. Carefully, he picked the lock using the bent wire hanger he'd prepared earlier. It took longer than expected, his hands trembling with nerves, but eventually the door clicked open. Slipping inside, he found himself in a dimly lit corridor lined with expensive paintings and marble floors that gleamed faintly under the moonlight streaming through tall windows. The opulence of the place struck him. It was worlds away from the cramped, dingy apartment he shared with Lily. His plan was simple. Find the safe where Langley kept his valuables, grab enough cash to cover Lily's treatment, and leave unnoticed. But finding the safe proved harder than anticipated. Ethan wandered through room after room, each more luxurious than the last. There were libraries filled with leather-bound books, dining halls with chandeliers dripping with crystals, and even a private theater. Yet no sign of a safe. Time ticked by agonizingly slowly, and panic started to creep in. Just as Ethan entered what appeared to be an office, a grand room with a massive mahogany desk, he heard a soft click behind him. Before he could react, bright lights flooded the space, blinding him momentarily. Squinting against the sudden brightness, Ethan turned around to see none other than Victor Langley himself standing in the doorway, flanked by two burly security guards. Langley looked nothing like the polished figure Ethan had seen in photographs. Dressed in casual slacks and a sweater, his expression was calm but piercing. For a moment, no one spoke. Ethan froze, his mind racing. He wanted to run, but the guards blocked the exit. Finally, Langley broke the silence. "What are you doing? Here?" Langley asked, his voice steady but curious rather than angry. Ethan swallowed hard, his throat dry. I didn't mean to hurt anyone," he stammered, clutching the straps of his backpack tightly. I need money." Langley raised an eyebrow, his sharp gaze never leaving Ethan. "Money? You broke into my house for money?" "It's not for me," Ethan blurted out, desperation edging his voice. "It's for my sister. She's sick, really sick. She needs treatment, but we can't afford it. I've tried everything, worked every job, sold everything I own, but it's not enough. I thought, if I could just take a little bit from someone who has so much, maybe I could save her." For a long moment, Langley said nothing. He studied Ethan carefully, as though trying to gauge whether the boy was telling the truth. Then, gesturing for the guards to stand down, he stepped closer. "Show me," he said simply. Confused but relieved that Langley hadn't called the police yet, Ethan pulled the photograph of Lily from his pocket. "This is her," he said, holding it out shakily. "Her name is Lily. She's 15. She's..." The strongest person I know, but she's fighting something she shouldn't have to fight alone. Please. I'll do anything to help her. Langley took the photograph, examining it closely. In the picture, Ethan and Lily were smiling, their arms wrapped around each other. Even in the faded photo, Lily's bright eyes sparkled with joy. Something shifted in Langley's demeanor. He glanced at Ethan, then back at the photo before handing it back. Tell me about her, Langley said, his tone softer now. And so, Ethan told him everything. He spoke about growing up without parents, about working tirelessly to provide for Lily, and about the crushing weight of knowing he might lose her. He described Lily's courage despite her illness, her dreams of becoming an artist, and the way she always found a way to laugh, even when things seemed hopeless. As Ethan talked, tears welled up in his eyes, but he didn't care. This was his chance to make Langley understand. When Ethan finished, Langley remained silent for a while, lost in thought. Finally, he nodded. Come with me, he said, motioning for Ethan to follow him. Still unsure of what was happening, Ethan obeyed. Langley led him to a sleek black car parked outside the mansion. One of the guards opened the door, and Langley gestured for Ethan to get in. Hesitant, but with no other choice, Ethan climbed into the vehicle. They drove in silence, the tension thick between them until they arrived at the hospital where Lily was being treated. Inside the hospital, Langley insisted on meeting Lily personally. At first, Ethan protested, fearing how his sister would react to seeing him accompanied by a stranger. But Langley reassured him, promising he only wanted to understand the situation better. When they entered Lily's room, she was lying in bed, pale but smiling weakly as she sketched in a notebook. Her face lit up when she saw Ethan, but her smile faltered slightly upon noticing Langley. "Who's this?" she asked softly, looking at Ethan questioningly. "This is Mr. Langley," Ethan replied, his voice barely above a whisper. He wants to meet you." Langley stepped forward, offering a gentle smile. "Hi, Lily. Your brothers told me a lot about you." Lily blinked, clearly confused but intrigued. "Really? What did he say?" "That you're brave," Langley said. "And talented. Can I see your drawings?" Shyly, Lily handed over her notebook. Langley flipped through the pages, marveling at the intricate sketches and vibrant colors. "These are incredible," he said sincerely. Turning to Ethan, he added, "Your sister is extraordinary." By the time they left the hospital, Langley's attitude toward Ethan had changed completely. Instead of anger or disdain, there was a glimmer of admiration, and perhaps even empathy, in his eyes. Back at the mansion, Langley dismissed the guards and invited Ethan to sit in the library. Pouring 2 glasses of water, he handed one to Ethan before speaking. "I'm not going to call the police," Langley began, surprising Ethan. "But I want you to promise me something. No more breaking laws. If you truly want to help your sister, let me help you do it the right way." Ethan stared at him, stunned. "Why would you do that?" he asked, his voice cracking. "You don't even know us." Langley leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Because sometimes people deserve a second chance, and because your love for your sister reminds me of something I've forgotten. That family is worth fighting for." As the night wore on, Langley outlined a plan. He would cover all of Lily's medical expenses, ensuring she received the best care possible. In return, Ethan would work for him, not as a servant but as an intern learning valuable skills that could shape his future. It wasn't charity, Langley emphasized. It was an opportunity. For Ethan, it felt like a lifeline thrown in the darkest hour. Though he didn't fully trust Langley yet, he couldn't deny the hope blooming within him. That night marked the beginning of a journey neither Ethan nor Langley could have predicted. A failed robbery attempt had somehow transformed into a chance for redemption, healing, and transformation. But both men knew one thing for certain. Their lives would never be the same again. The days following Ethan's encounter with Victor Langley felt surreal, almost dreamlike. For someone who had spent his entire life struggling to stay afloat, the sudden turn of events was hard to process. Ethan found himself caught between disbelief and gratitude, unsure whether to trust Langley's intentions fully. After all, billionaires weren't known for their generosity without strings attached. Yet every time doubt crept in, he reminded himself of one undeniable truth. Langley had saved Lily. True to his word, Langley wasted no time in arranging for Lily's treatment. Within days, she was transferred to a state-of-the-art medical facility in the city, where specialists reviewed her case and began preparing her for the experimental procedure that offered her best chance at survival. The cost of everything, from consultations to medications to surgeries, was covered entirely by Langley. Ethan couldn't help but marvel at how effortlessly Langley handled it all, as though money were merely numbers on a screen rather than an insurmountable barrier for ordinary people like him. But Langley didn't stop there. He visited Lily frequently, often bringing small gifts or books to keep her entertained during her recovery. At first, Ethan was wary of these visits, wondering if Langley had ulterior motives. However, the sincerity in Langley's interactions with Lily soon put his fears to rest. There was no pretense, no hidden agenda, just genuine interest in getting to know the girl whose story had moved him so deeply. Over time, Ethan noticed subtle changes in Langley himself. The billionaire, once distant and aloof, seemed more approachable, even kinder. It was as though meeting Lily had awakened something within him, a part of himself he'd long neglected. As Lily underwent treatment, Ethan began fulfilling his end of the bargain. Langley enrolled him in an internship program at one of his tech companies, assigning him to work under a senior manager named Clara. Initially, Ethan felt out of place among the polished professionals who spoke in technical jargon and wore tailored suits. He stuck out like a sore thumb in his worn jeans and secondhand sneakers, feeling acutely aware of his lack of education and experience. But Clara, unlike many others, saw potential in him. She took him under her wing, patiently teaching him the basics of office operations, customer service, and problem solving. Ethan threw himself into the work with unwavering determination. He arrived early, stayed late, and asked endless questions, eager to learn as much as possible. His natural curiosity and willingness to adapt quickly earned him respect from his colleagues. Slowly but surely, he began to find his footing. Tasks that once seemed impossible became manageable, and challenges that would have intimidated him before now fueled his drive to succeed. For the first time in years, Ethan allowed himself to dream, not just about saving Lily, but about building a better future for both of them. Meanwhile, Langley kept a close eye on Ethan's progress. He occasionally stopped by the office to check in, asking thoughtful questions about Ethan's experiences and offering advice when needed. Their conversations grew less formal over time, evolving from employer-employee exchanges into something resembling mentorship. Langley shared stories from his own rise to success, recounting the mistakes he'd made along the way and the lessons he'd learned. To Ethan, these moments were invaluable. They gave him insight not only into the world of business but also into the complexities of human nature. One evening, after a particularly grueling day at the office, Langley invited Ethan to join him for dinner at his mansion. Though hesitant at first, Ethan accepted, curious to see what lay behind the polished exterior of the man who had changed his life. Over a simple yet elegant meal, they talked about everything from technology trends to personal aspirations. Langley surprised Ethan by opening up about his own struggles, how he had sacrificed relationships and emotional connections in pursuit of wealth and power. Success isn't worth much if you don't have anyone to share it with, Langley admitted, his voice tinged with regret. That conversation left a lasting impression on Ethan. It made him realize that despite their vastly different backgrounds, he and Langley weren't so different after all. Both had carried heavy burdens, albeit in different forms. While Ethan fought to protect his family, Langley had built an empire at the expense of his own happiness. In helping Ethan and Lily, Langley wasn't just giving them a second chance. He was rediscovering a piece of himself he thought he'd lost forever. Back at the hospital, Lily's condition started improving steadily. The experimental treatment was working wonders, shrinking the tumors and restoring her strength. Her laughter returned, brighter and more infectious than ever. She resumed sketching, filling notebook after notebook with drawings inspired by her journey. One day she proudly showed Langley a portrait she had created of him. "You're like a superhero," she said with a grin. "Except you wear sweaters instead of capes." Langley chuckled, visibly touched. "I think I prefer sweaters," he replied. "They're cozier." As weeks turned into months, Ethan noticed another remarkable change. Langley's presence in their lives brought unexpected stability. Bills were paid on time, groceries were stocked, and for the first time in years, Ethan could breathe a little easier. More importantly, he and Lily began to envision a future beyond survival. They dreamed of traveling, of going back to school, of pursuing passions they had set aside long ago. Langley encouraged these dreams, reminding them that hope was a powerful force, one capable of transforming even the darkest situations into opportunities for growth. Yet, amidst all the positive changes, Ethan couldn't shake the lingering sense of indebtedness. Every time he looked at Langley, he felt a mix of gratitude and guilt. How could he ever repay someone who had given him so much? Sensing this internal conflict, Langley addressed it head-on during one of their mentoring sessions. "Ethan," he said firmly, "you don't owe me anything. What I've done for you and Lily isn't charity, it's an investment. You're proving every day that you're worth it. Keep working hard, stay true to yourself, and let your actions speak for you." Those words resonated deeply with Ethan. They reminded him that while he couldn't erase the past, he could shape the future. With each passing day, he grew more confident, more determined, and more hopeful. And though challenges still lay ahead, he faced them with renewed courage, knowing he wasn't alone. Together, he, Lily, and Langley had formed an unlikely bond, one forged through desperation, compassion, and the unyielding belief that even in the face of adversity, humanity has the power to triumph. Months passed, and Ethan's life began to transform in ways he never imagined. The internship at Langley's company wasn't just a job, it was an education. Under Clara's guidance, Ethan learned the intricacies of business operations, from managing client relationships to understanding financial reports. At first, the jargon and technical details overwhelmed him, but his determination saw him through. He spent late nights poring over manuals, watching tutorials online, and practicing what he'd learned during the day. Slowly, the pieces started coming together. Ethan's hard work didn't go unnoticed. His colleagues, who had initially dismissed him as an outsider with no formal qualifications, began to respect his tenacity. They admired how he approached problems with fresh eyes, often suggesting innovative solutions that others hadn't considered. Clara frequently praised him in team meetings, highlighting his contributions and encouraging him to take on more responsibilities. It was a far cry from the days when Ethan doubted whether he belonged in such a professional environment. Langley continued to play a pivotal role in Ethan's journey. While he maintained a hands-off approach to daily operations, he made it a point to check in regularly. During these conversations, Langley shared insights into leadership, decision-making, and the importance of integrity in business. "Success isn't measured by how much money you make," he told Ethan one evening over coffee. "It's about the impact you have on others, the lives you touch, the opportunities you create." These words resonated deeply with Ethan, shaping not only his career aspirations but also his outlook on life. As Ethan grew more confident in his abilities, so did Lily. Her health improved dramatically thanks to the experimental treatment, and she regained much of her energy and spirit. She returned to school part-time, excelling in her art classes and earning praise from her teachers. Her sketches became bolder, filled with vibrant colors and intricate details that reflected her resilience and optimism. One of her paintings, a vivid depiction of a phoenix rising from ashes, caught Langley's attention. Moved by its symbolism, he commissioned her to create a piece for his office wall. For Lily, this was more than just recognition. It was validation of her talent and dreams. Despite the progress they were making, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that their debt to Langley was insurmountable. Every time he thought about the countless dollars Langley had spent on Lily's treatment and the opportunities he'd provided, Guilt gnawed at him. He tried to express his gratitude repeatedly, but Langley always brushed it off. "You're doing your part," Langley would say. "That's all I ask." Determined to prove himself, Ethan threw himself into his work with even greater intensity. He volunteered for challenging projects, took initiative in solving complex issues, and sought feedback to improve his skills. His efforts paid off when Clara promoted him to a junior managerial position within a year of starting the internship. It was a significant milestone, one that filled Ethan with pride and a renewed sense of purpose. For the first time, he felt like he was truly building something, not just for himself, but for Lily too. Langley noticed Ethan's growth and decided to give him an opportunity that would test his capabilities further. A new project aimed at developing affordable technology for underprivileged communities was in its early stages, and Langley asked Ethan to lead a small team tasked with brainstorming ideas. Initially hesitant, Ethan accepted the challenge, knowing it was a chance to make a real difference. Over the next few months, he worked tirelessly with his team, combining his first-hand knowledge of struggles faced by low-income families with innovative technological solutions. The result was a prototype for a low-cost educational tablet designed specifically for children in underserved areas. When Langley reviewed the project, he was impressed, not only by the product itself, but by the passion and dedication Ethan had poured into it. "This is exactly the kind of innovation we need," Langley said during the presentation. "It's practical, impactful, and driven by empathy. You've exceeded my expectations, Ethan." The success of the project marked a turning point in Ethan's career. He was no longer just an intern or a junior employee. He was emerging as a leader capable of driving meaningful change. More importantly, it reinforced his belief that adversity could be transformed into strength. The boy who once broke into Langley's mansion out of desperation was now standing beside him as a trusted protege, contributing to projects that aligned with his values. But perhaps the most profound transformation occurred within Langley himself. Through his interactions with Ethan and Lily, he rediscovered the joy of human connection. Their unwavering bond reminded him of the family he had distanced himself from in pursuit of wealth. Inspired by their resilience, Langley began reaching out to his estranged siblings, mending fences that had stood for decades. He also started dedicating more time to philanthropy, establishing a foundation focused on providing medical assistance and educational resources to families in need. Ethan and Lily became the faces of the foundation, sharing their story to inspire others and raise awareness about the challenges faced by those without access to adequate health care. One evening, as Ethan sat in Langley's library discussing future plans, Langley handed him a folder containing documents related to a scholarship fund he had set up in Lily's name. "I want her to pursue her dreams without worrying about finances," Langley explained. "And I want other kids like her to have the same opportunity." Tears welled up in Ethan's eyes as he flipped through the papers. "Why are you doing all this for us?" he asked, his voice trembling. "We're just ordinary people." Langley smiled softly. "Because extraordinary things happen when ordinary people refuse to give up. You and Lily reminded me of that. And for that, I'll always be grateful." As the night drew to a close, Ethan realized that their relationship with Langley had evolved beyond gratitude or obligation. It had become a partnership built on mutual respect, trust, and shared purpose. Together, they had turned a desperate act into a catalyst for positive change, not just in their own lives, but in the lives of countless others. And though the road ahead still held challenges, Ethan knew they were ready to face them, together. Years had passed since that fateful night when Ethan broke into Victor Langley's mansion, driven by desperation and love for his sister. Now, as he stood on the stage of a packed auditorium, preparing to deliver a speech at the annual gala for Langley's Foundation, Ethan couldn't help but reflect on how far they had come. The boy who once felt trapped by circumstance was now a confident young man, dressed in a sharp suit, surrounded by people eager to hear his story. Beside him sat Lily, radiant and healthy, her artwork displayed prominently throughout the venue. Their journey from despair to hope had not only changed their lives but also inspired countless others. Ethan began his speech by recounting the darkest days, the sleepless nights spent worrying about Lily's health, the endless hours working, menial jobs just to scrape by, and the overwhelming sense of helplessness that consumed him. He spoke candidly about the decision to break into Langley's mansion, admitting that it wasn't bravery or cunning that drove him, but sheer desperation. "I thought I had no other choice," he said, his voice steady despite the weight of the memory. "But looking back now, I realize that moment of weakness led me to one of the strongest people I've ever known, Victor Langley." He went on to describe how Langley didn't just save Lily's life, he gave them both a second chance. By covering Lily's medical expenses and offering Ethan an internship, Langley opened doors neither of them thought possible. But more importantly, Langley taught Ethan the value of resilience, hard work, and integrity. "He showed me that success isn't about what you have, it's about what you do with what you have," Ethan explained. "And he reminded me that even in our darkest moments, there's always light if we're willing to look for it." The audience listened intently, many wiping away tears as Ethan shared anecdotes about his growth within Langley's company. From struggling to understand basic office tasks to leading innovative projects aimed at helping underserved communities, Ethan's transformation was nothing short of remarkable. He credited much of his success to Clara, his mentor, and to Langley himself, who never stopped believing in him. "Mr. Langley didn't just give us money or opportunities," Ethan said. "He gave us hope. And sometimes hope is the most powerful gift of all." Lily joined him on stage midway through the speech, earning thunderous applause from the crowd. She spoke briefly about her own journey, how her illness shaped her perspective on life and art, and how the support she received allowed her to chase her dreams fearlessly. Holding up a painting she had created specifically for the event, titled "Wings of Hope," she explained its meaning. "This piece represents everyone here tonight," she said with a bright smile. "It's about rising above challenges and finding beauty in the struggle. Without this foundation, and without people like my brother and Mr. Langley, I wouldn't be standing here today." When the siblings finished their speeches, Langley took the stage to close the evening. Dressed in his signature sweater and slacks, he looked every bit the humble billionaire he had become. His words were simple, yet profound. "When I met Ethan and Lily, I saw two individuals fighting against impossible odds. What I didn't expect was how much they would teach me. They reminded me of the importance of family, compassion, and using my resources to make a difference. This foundation isn't mine. It belongs to everyone who believes in creating a better future for those in need." The gala raised millions of dollars that night, funds earmarked for expanding access to healthcare, education, and technology for underprivileged families. As Ethan mingled with attendees afterward, shaking hands and sharing stories, he marveled at the ripple effect of their journey. People approached him and Lily, thanking them for inspiring change and urging them to continue sharing their story. For the first time in years, Ethan felt truly at peace, knowing that their struggles hadn't been in vain. In the months that followed, Ethan continued to rise through the ranks at Langley's company. He eventually became head of the social innovation division, overseeing projects designed to uplift marginalized communities. Lily, meanwhile, pursued her passion for art, earning scholarships to prestigious universities and gaining recognition for her thought-provoking pieces. Her paintings toured galleries across the country, each one carrying a message of resilience and hope. Langley remained a constant presence in their lives, mentoring Ethan and supporting Lily's artistic endeavors. Though their relationship had evolved beyond employer-employee dynamics, the bond between them remained unshakable. On weekends, the three often gathered at Langley's estate, not for formal meetings, but for quiet dinners where they laughed, shared stories, and dreamed of new ways to give back to society. One day, while walking through the gardens of Langley's property, Ethan paused to admire a tree he and Lily had planted years earlier during one of their visits. It had grown tall and sturdy, its branches reaching skyward. "You know," Ethan said, turning to Langley, "when we first came here, I thought this place represented everything I could never have. But now, I see it as a reminder of what's possible when people come together to support each other. Langley nodded, a proud smile spreading across his face. That tree is a lot like you and Lily, he replied, rooted in strength, growing toward the light, and making the world around you a little brighter. As the years rolled on, Ethan and Lily became symbols of perseverance and triumph over adversity. Their story was featured in books, documentaries, and interviews, inspiring millions worldwide. Yet despite their newfound fame, they remained grounded, always remembering where they came from and the lessons they learned along the way. Looking back, Ethan realized that breaking into Langley's mansion wasn't the defining moment of his life. It was what happened afterward. That single act of desperation set off a chain reaction of kindness, trust, and transformation that touched countless lives. Through grit, gratitude, and the unwavering belief that love conquers all, Ethan and Lily proved that even in the bleakest moments, humanity has the power to shine brightest.